Hi, you are watching Voice of Canada and this is Sana Haroon. Canada is preparing for a major historic milestone on Monday, when Inuit leader Mary Simon will be sworn in as the country's 30th Governor General, the first Indigenous woman in Canada to do so.
The path to Rideau Hall for Mary Simon began in 1947 in the northern Quebec village of Kanyakswalachak, an Inuit village of a few hundred on the shores of Ungava Bay.
My mother was Inuk and my father was from the south, was manager of the local Hudson Bay Company Post. I spent my adolescence in Nunavik, living a very traditional lifestyle.
As a child, Simon was forced to attend a federal day school in nearby Kuujjuaq, and she was forbidden to speak her own language, Inuktitut, and though the school was in Quebec, instruction was in English only. By the 1970s, she had joined the CBC Northern Service as a broadcaster, and by the end of the decade, she had begun her transition into public service, working for various organizations representing Canada's Inuit. In the early 80s, she attended constitutional talks hosted by Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, and quickly made her mark challenging the PM.
Everybody's going to shake their head and they're going to say, well, we spent way too much time on the Equality Clause, and yet we're talking about a fundamental right.
I wish you and your sisters would take it out of your head that somehow we're deliberately trying to frustrate the concept of equality. At least in the law, everybody is assured here, you hear, that we are not. Simon?
As people, we have one interest, and that is our collective and individual rights. And all I'm saying here is that as someone that represents both sides, I'd like to see the Equality Clause once and for all settled.
In the 1990s, the Canadian government would ask Simon to serve as Canada's ambassador for circumpolar affairs and Canada's ambassador to Denmark. Most recently, she has worked to improve Inuit education. Simon says she fully expects to continue her lifelong work advancing the interests of Inuit and other Indigenous peoples, now as the Canadian representative of Queen Elizabeth II.
There are very important responsibilities associated with my role that will help the working relationship of Canadians and Indigenous people.
And beginning Monday, she will begin that new chapter in a life of work for the Arctic and its peoples.
Canadian women are leading the way at the Tokyo Olympic Games as Team Canada announced its first set of silver medals during the women's swimming events.
With a silver medal around her neck, Penny Oleksiak's collection grows to 5. She is now tied as Canada's most decorated Summer Olympian. After the win, she said when she gets in the water every time, it is to get a medal for the girls. The strength of the 21-year-old from Toronto pulled the women's 4x100 relay team towards the podium and the first medal for Canada at the Tokyo Games. Oleksiak, Rebecca Smith, Maggie McNeil, and Kayla Sanchez have been swimming together for years, and their bond is as solid as their newly acquired hardware. Sanchez called the victory sick. Jennifer Abel and Melissa Citrini-Beaulieu also earned silver medals. Their 3-meter synchro diving performance started slow, but on their third dive, they found their groove, and after number 5, they knew they were on the podium. Shortly after arriving in Tokyo, Citrini-Beaulieu explained why she and Abel click. These are Abel's 4th games, but the first for Citrini-Beaulieu.
Yeah.
Her parents watching back in Canada, overjoyed by their daughter's success.
L'accomplissement de toute sa carrière.
Over 250 fires continue to burn in British Columbia as hot and dry conditions continue to fuel dangerous blazes threatening the province.
And crews were still working tirelessly, of course, as this fire continues to grow. All the evacuation orders in place are expected to stay with tensions and concerns incredibly high. And while there is good news with no new evacuations, it is still an uphill battle to try and gain control of this blaze. A few hours north of here in Sicamous, BC, where a wildfire has forced basically the entire tourist town to be evacuated, they are being told to expect to remain out of their homes for at least another week. A major highway there remains closed as well as crews continue.
Thousands of migrant workers took to Parliament Hill in Ottawa to protest on Sunday, calling for changes to Canada's immigration laws to allow them rights and freedoms enjoyed by Canadians.
Most are not Canadians, and yet they've come to the seat of Canada's government demanding rule changes which they hope will set them on a path to becoming Canadian.
Rights.
Without those rights, migrant workers were left vulnerable during the pandemic.
These guys are farm worker like myself.
Omar Walcott points to the poster of some of the 14 migrant workers who died in Canada last year, most from COVID-19, caught in unsafe living conditions.
They die underneath Trudeau's watch.
The vast majority of these migrants arrived in Canada legally to help harvest food on Canada's farms or help care for the elderly, the sick, or the very young. But as work permits or visas expired, they found themselves unable or unwilling to return home because of the pandemic. Now, 1.6 million are stuck in immigration limbo, working in Canada without labour law protection or access to Canada's healthcare system. Like Mayanwe, who is from Cameroon, have been trying for years to become a Canadian citizen.
I love the country. It's always been my dream country.
The federal government is hosting a national summit on Islamophobia following a series of hate crimes targeting Muslims across Canada. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau promised to do more, but there are concerns his words won't translate into action.
Imam Kamal Kurji felt helpless when his wife called him last week. She was with their daughter in a pharmacy parking lot when she says a man in a truck yelling racist slurs tried to run them down. Fortunately, bystanders stepped in, and the man was eventually arrested and charged. Kurji says his thoughts went immediately to 4 members of the Afzal family, who were run over and killed in an alleged hate crime 6 weeks ago in nearby London, Ontario. On the heels of those incidents and a series of hate-related crimes targeting Muslims across the country, that the federal government convened a virtual summit on Islamophobia.
To young Muslims who take to the streets to advocate and protest, who call on their elected officials to do more, we see you and we hear you.
Professor Anwar Iman of the Institute of Islamic Studies at the University of Toronto is hopeful for change, but he sees Islamophobia as a problem that's pervasive in society, and that includes government. The school has released a study that found government audits routinely target and are biased against Muslim charities, for example. Change and accountability, speaking truth to power, he says, can be uncomfortable. But without it, he doesn't see lasting progress happening.
As the Taliban gains control over parts of Afghanistan, interpreters who once helped Canadian troops are living in fear.
The Afghan military has been losing ground for weeks. When it does, the Taliban moves in. As they do, they have targets.
Yeah, I was in a bad place.
We spoke to a former Afghan interpreter who worked with Canadian troops in 2010 and 2011. Last week, he was in a town outside Kandahar. We're protecting his identity. He says the Taliban was after him.
They already have information about the people who work with coalition forces or NATO. When they enter to the city, they were going directly to the house home and take out him from the home, and they kill in front of their parents and of their families.
Now, that interpreter's been moved with his wife and daughter. Where exactly, we've been asked not to say, only that it's a safer place and a location that'll make it easier to get them out of the country eventually. But that family is one of close to 24 being helped by a group of retired Canadian soldiers. They've been organizing, fundraising, and calling in favors to help people who used to work with them. Now, there is frustration with the federal government. While Ottawa has said it's working on a plan, that's about all it's said. There's no word on who'd qualify, and there's no timeline. The sister of Captain Nicola Goddard, Canada's first female soldier to be killed in combat. Rusk says her sister's interpreter is still in Afghanistan. A potential airlift would likely be out of Kabul, but there was a sign this week the capital is getting less and less safe. These were rockets landing near the presidential palace during prayers Tuesday.
Allah.
With each day that passes, there is an increasing urgency to get interpreters out.
Newly obtained emails from Toronto Public Health suggest a long-term care home, which had the deadliest COVID-19 outbreak in Ontario, ignored advice that could have helped save lives.
For months, Tendercare Living Centre had an outbreak plan in place. Use a vacant wing of its 4th floor to isolate residents who tested positive for COVID-19. But when COVID struck on December 4th, the 4th floor wasn't used. Internal emails from Toronto Public Health obtained by Global News suggest Tendercare changed course only days into the outbreak, saying the 4th floor was not appropriate for a variety of reasons, such as no call bells and no curtains. According to the emails written in April, Toronto Public Health and Scarborough Health Network suggested a seemingly simple solution: baby monitors for no call bells and room dividers for the lack of curtains. But, Toronto Public Health wrote, these suggestions were not agreed upon by the facility. Management company Extendicare would answer questions about the Toronto Public Health emails that say the home rejected advice to use baby monitors and room dividers. Extendicare says the region was overwhelmed with COVID cases and there were no staffing resources available to open the unit. That response isn't enough for those who lost their loved ones at Tendercare, like Reed Zhao, whose grandmother died of COVID. The Ontario government has apologized for the impact of the pandemic on long-term care homes and says new legislation is coming this fall.
Keep watching Voice of Canada for further updates. Visit our website voiceofcanada.tv.